Hello and welcome to the RPG Blender, where we give lesser played games and forgotten settings the roll the dice they deserve. I'm your host, Game Master George, and today we'll be closing out our tutorial series on one of my favorite spooky month games, Don't Rest Your Head. So far, we covered the setting, character creation, and mechanics of the game, so if you missed those, go check them out here. Now today I'll be covering some of the central ideas of running this game, the core concepts, as well as how to use some of the tools provided. Whereas my previous installments have had aspects useful for the players, this one is truly narrator focused. So if your only goal is to learn how to be a player in the game, you won't find much use here, so send your narrator instead. And with that out of the way, let's dive into Let's Run Don't Rest Your Head, Narrating the Nightmare. One of the biggest strengths of this game is the use of the questionnaire. Learning to run this game effectively relies heavily on making good use of these questions. So let's talk about how we can best utilize these. What's been keeping you awake? This question forms the backbone of the protagonist's experience, something that is a primary motivator. Using this effectively means providing hooks or story beats which play into their source of insomnia. This is also a question which can be used for character development through the use of flashbacks to their pre-awakened life. Back to the example of Edwin, his paranoia can be used to draw his attention in directions you like. He can spot eyes watching him from above, or oddly seemingly run into the same individual in multiple unrelated locations. Or perhaps he will even think he spots one of his neighbors from the city slumbering within the mad city, triggering a flashback to a moment when he saw them engaging in suspicious behavior. All of these will be triggers for his history of paranoia, and should have an effect on the paranoia-driven Edwin. What just happened to you? This question is fairly easy to see how to use. It is quite literally the player telling you how they want their game to begin. This scene should be open-ended, with some kind of stressful stimulus allowing you to interpret it and begin to introduce the character to the mad city. So look at this moment and at the list of nightmares you want to involve in your game. Do any of them relate in some way to the moment they've chosen? Take that nightmare and use it to influence their actions and drive them into the story. With Edwin, he chose to witness a neighbor engaging in cannibalism as his beginning moment. Given his paranoia and likely distrust of the media, I chose to have him be contacted by a pinhead, seeking the scoop on the story he witnessed. A few hints about their impossible knowledge tweaked his suspicions enough to unplug the phone, which was hardly a detriment to the mad city. A few needle noses on his trail and he was driven forward into the city proper. What's on the surface? This question helps to provide you with a starting point for how the world will interact with this character. Consider how you respond to somebody when you first meet them. Does your initial interaction change if they hold themselves with confidence and a loud nature, as opposed to being quiet and withdrawn? Similarly, this allows you to better gauge how an NPC will interact with the protagonist by giving you this kind of snap decision information. Edwin presents himself as a timid individual, insecure and weak. As such, a character with a dominating nature will approach him aggressively, seeking to cow him, whereas one who is more nurturing will be gentle toward him in an effort to soothe his fears. By considering this question, as well as the natures of your NPCs, you can quickly create distinct characterizations with just a few moments. What lies beneath? Utilizing this question requires a bit more finesse to do properly. In an ideal situation, you will want to provide opportunities for the protagonist to display these hidden traits, but the choice to do so must always lie with the player. This is a primary secret of the character, and its revelation should come at a moment of character growth. There is only one chance for this big reveal, so give opportunities, but don't force the player into doing so earlier than they would like. With Edwin, his timid exterior hides a bold, scrappy, and protective core. When he is able to push past the fear, he can display selfless heroism to the point of self-sacrifice. So along the journey, I would provide opportunities to face his pursuers while still leaving the door open for escape. This provides the player with the choice of the moment when he would like Edwin to stand and display his true nature, while still giving him the opportunity to choose another path if the moment doesn't seem right. What is your path? The final question is the one that gives you the most to work with. This is where the player tells you how they would see their character progressing. This isn't necessarily how things will end, of course, but it helps to give you an idea of how you can progress the character's story in a way that will satisfy the player. It is an assessment of their goals, dreams, how they would choose to complete the story. With Edwin, his chosen end is an extension of his hidden self, to die, but in doing so, to reveal the truth about the hidden dangers. This could be an attempt to expose the Mad City to the sleepers, a goal which would end in tragedy as reality actively seeks to explain away the oddities of the Mad City. He has written here an end where he would reach his goal, expose the secrets, only to see his work shattered by the resilient nature of reality. But perhaps, in that final moment, he sees a few awaken to the Mad City, seeing the hope of a new group who might be able to find a way to deal with the nightmares. World versus protagonist. This leads to a very important idea for this game. Your story doesn't matter. This game is about emphasizing the journey of the protagonists, not a world-spanning plot. This isn't a game where you set up some big bad and the story revolves around stopping them. There can, of course, be such a character, and that goal can exist, but it only does so to facilitate character journeys. That questionnaire your players fill out is the story. It's your job as the narrator to create moments which allow them to highlight and continue their protagonist's growth. This is where world versus protagonist comes into play. This is a mutable world. It is the Mad City after all. You should not feel tied to any particular event, lore, or interpretation. Everything should come from the mind and eyes of the protagonists. If something about the world doesn't support the story of the protagonists, it needs to change. Consider the Mad City as your protagonist's personal hell, built to test and torture them specifically, to prompt them to grow toward the end of their story. How to meet. Alright, so you have your group of protagonists, each with their individual stories. How do you bring them together? Well, by its nature, this game is great for smaller groups, where you can give each protagonist their intimate moments. So I have found the best beginning is to run through each character's initial scene until the moment they enter the Mad City. With the strange interconnectedness of the city's entrances, that is a perfect way to gather the group. It gives each player a bit of that personal touch as you spotlight them and their individual story before the group unites. Nightmares. Let's get to the nightmares. Nightmares are the meat of what you get to work with in telling your tale of horror. So take some time to create something unique as a centerpiece. The nightmare is one of the primary reasons I feel a Session 0 is incredibly important for this game. If you build a nightmare based on the protagonists in your game, you will have a much more effective storytelling piece. After Session 0, sit down with the sheets and try to find a common thread. Maybe one is afraid of technology, while another spends too much time online, and the third works a soul-sucking dead-end job in IT. To bind them together with a connected foe, create a nightmare based on this common thread. Now, there are 3 different levels of nightmare you should create within this theme. First are the minions. These are the minor followers of the main nightmare, dangerous on their own, but most threatening in large numbers. They will have between 2 and 4 pain dice, depending on the specific situation and number. In general, they won't have any true potent abilities, but if they do, it should be fairly minor. An example of these would be the promising students. Next are the lieutenants. These are more threatening figures, often alone or in small groups at most. They have a wider range of possible dice, between 3 and 7 pain dice, as this is where uniqueness comes closer into play. They will likely have an ability which is nearly equivalent to a protagonist's madness talent. Continuing with the high school, the lieutenants here would be the ladies in hating. Last up with the nightmares are the big bosses. These are the apex predators, acting alone as devastating forces easily able to overwhelm a single protagonist. They can bring multiple madness level equivalents against the protagonist, and have a territory of their own, warped to their own twisted nature. Expect at least 8 to 12 pain dice, possibly more in their home. The ruler of the high school would be Mother Wen. So for our tech nightmare example, our minions would be the screen zombie, shuffling around with a phone literally glued to their face, seeking to capture the next meme-worthy awakened. Individually, they're little threat, a mere 1 or 2 pain, but they are never found without at least 2 of their besties. Our lieutenants will be the sensor shippers, colorless, blocky humanoids, devoid of any features which could be deemed suggestive. At a base, they are only 3 pain, but should someone in their presence utter a profanity or engage in violent or lewd behavior, they will be enraged and increased to 6 pain. Finally, our boss will be the Static, a formless creature traveling through internet-enabled devices. It hunts by manipulating search results and map programs to lure unsuspecting prey to one of its server farms, where the victim will be connected to its hive mind or converted into a screen zombie or sensor shipper. With that, we've got a passable nightmare crew. Nothing too fancy, but it doesn't need to be. Sometimes the simplest things are the most effective. And while you're here, why not drop a nightmare concept in the comments below? Share your ideas for future viewers. Coins. Enough about nightmares. Let's briefly talk about coins. Coins of despair are easy to miscategorize. At the surface, it feels very much like they are just a way to mess with your player, but in truth, they are a very vital component to the game's systems. If you don't spend the despair, your players never get hope, and hope is how they can tackle the larger challenges and recover from bad rolls. So use the coins. Play up how mean you're being to your players, but know that this is in truth helping them to succeed later. Oh, and your coins are lost at the end of the session like theirs are, so use those puppies up.
Scars.
To close this out, let's discuss the long game. In all honesty, this game is best suited towards shorter play. 1 to 3 sessions of a self-contained story. But what if you want a longer adventure? Of course, your story can go as long as you like, but your players will likely expect some form of character advancement. Since there are no levels, skills, and your power fluctuates constantly, how can protagonists get stronger? This is where scars come in. When a player has an important experience, you can award them a scar. This scar can be used in 2 ways. After making a roll, the player can recall a scar by explaining how it applies to the current situation. If you agree that it's applicable, the player checks off the scar and can re-roll one of their dice pools, replacing the previous result. The scar will be unchecked at the end of the session, meaning it can be used once per game. The second option is to transform a scar. This is a much more potent but single-use effect. Again, the player must explain how the scar applies to the current situation. In doing so, they can choose one of 3 effects. They can, for either one scene or permanently, change their madness talent. They can also do this for their exhaustion talent. And finally, they can use it to immediately spend 5 hope coins, which are not subtracted from the hope coffer, a spend which does not require a moment of calm, allowing them to potentially prevent a catastrophic crash or snap. These effects don't directly change the character or play of the game. Instead, they give the protagonist greater survivability. As they gain more scars, they gain more rerolls or opportunities to transform, allowing them to more freely interact with the world around them. And with that, we've completed the series. At this point, you should have all the knowledge and tools you need to run this game. I hope this series has been helpful for you. It's a fantastic little game with a unique concept and rule set for your next spooky game night. If you agree and you'd like to pick up the book, check out the affiliate links in the description. You get a new RPG and help support the channel. And if you've enjoyed this series, consider doing all those things we always ask for: like, comment, and subscribe. It lets me know that these videos are actually helping someone. And if you have a game you'd like me to cover, by all means, drop the name. I'm always hunting for new and underrepresented games. And of course, if you feel particularly generous, consider joining our Patreon to take more of a direct hand in our growth and upcoming videos. Anyway, thank you again, and remember, there's gaming outside the Forgotten Realms.